with until George W. Bush. So some fun things. So you can't look at the 90s without looking at the pop culture and fun side. Actually, a lot of this stuff is being repeated. Bodysuits were immensely popular, oddly enough. Thick heels, I actually had a pair of shoes very similar to those. Crisscross brought in the backwards look where they would wear their clothes backwards. Go watch some music videos from the 90s. I'm sure you'll see some amazing things. Cut off jeans, you would take a pair of jeans that you had, cut them off. They were shorts or jorts, as you would. Grunge fashion was in style. Fanny packs in the early 90s. Of course, those are back now, where they call them belt bags. It's still a fanny pack. Super baggy pants, think MC Hammer style. Because of Julia Roberts' role in Pretty Woman, she helped influence the bare midriff of the 90s, which we've seen come back, crop tops, and of course, hopefully high waist jeans. Just follow the dress code. Short skirts, mini skirts. Umbro shorts were popular. These are soccer shorts that are like silkier. Baby doll dresses. I own several baby doll dresses. And of course, bicycle shorts, which we've seen come back as well. There's some slap bracelets for you. Those were banned from my school. They were dangerous. Some fun toys, of course, Pogs. I love Pogs. We used to play Pogs all the time, me and my brother. It was fun. Tickle Me Elmo, Furbies, Super Soakers, Beanie Babies. That was going to be my retirement, my investment in my Beanie Baby collection. Clearly, that's not happening. Game Boys, Buzz Lightyear with Toy Story, of course, the Power Rangers, Tamagotchis, or what'd they call them? The little virtual pets that they had. And then, of course, Pokemon came out in the 90s. Here's some popular movies for you if you're bored at home and you need some good ones. These are all actually really good. Twister, I haven't seen that in forever. To go back and watch it. But excellent movies from the 90s. I think actually Saving Private Ryan, I want to say it was early 2000s, but nonetheless, same area. 90s technology, there you go. Floppy disks, those are actually Mac computers on the left. My school actually had those in the library. Did some research. That was the first time I think I had been on the internet was on one of those. Beepers, oh, craziness. Some memorable events from the 1990s, of course, the O.J. Simpson trial. Apple was within days of bankruptcy, and Bill Gates actually bailed them out. On the top right, you have the Rodney King verdict, sparked the LA riots. Of course, Biggie and Tupac are both killed in the 90s. Tanya Harding, her boyfriend like took a crowbar and whacked Nancy Kerrigan in the leg right before the Olympics. They thought they were going to break her leg. They actually just bruised it, luckily. So she was still able to perform. And of course, Y2K. You guys don't remember that. People went crazy. I don't even, you guys probably weren't even born during that. So let's talk a little bit about George W. Bush, the son of Herbert Walker Bush. Those are some pictures there of him. And then here we've got the Bush election. Newsweek, I actually have this Newsweek or had this Newsweek back in the day. The craziest election was the election of 2000s. Baby Bush, George W. Bush actually wins, but it's the closest election in history. It basically came down to just a couple counties in Florida. And I'm trying to remember, there was a movie about this. It was basically like a movie about how the election comes down to like one person's vote and everybody's trying to influence him and what he does. But very similar in this scenario, it wasn't one person, but it was just a couple counties, a few thousand people actually determined who won. And you can see George W. Bush did not win the popular vote, but he was able to win the electoral vote. Super, super close. I know I went to bed the night of the 2000 election thinking that Al Gore had won. And when I woke up in the middle of the night, I guess it had flip-flopped back and forth. They had said George W. Bush, then they said Al Gore, then they said George W. Bush again, and then they said it's too close to call, we don't know. So it gets a little wild. So here's your total votes. You can pause this and look. Both needed Florida's 25 electoral votes to win. And like we said, Bush won by 537 votes. Total, actually, I thought it was 1,000, but okay, I'm wrong. I know I'm wrong. It was very, very close. Gore actually took the case to the Supreme Court and they said no, he wins. So part of George W. Bush's campaign Bush's domestic policy was education, no child left behind. He wanted to revamp education, which he did do, good, bad, or indifferent. Healthcare, he does sign a Medicare drug benefit into law. He does veto some state children's healthcare insurance programs to assist low-income children. And then the environment, he proposed some changes, but really not a whole lot was done during his presidency. He believes that global warming is real, but won't confirm that it's actually man-made. So 9/11, this is really what defines George W. Bush's presidency. What was it? He was inaugurated in January, so 8 months after being inaugurated approximately. Of course, we have terrorism in the United States. New York, you have two planes that crashed into the World Trade Center. Within hours, both of those collapsed. In DC, they had a plane that attacked the Pentagon, flew into the Pentagon. And then in Pennsylvania, a plane went down. They believe it was headed towards Washington, D.C., either the Capitol building or the White House. But the people on board, called from their phones from the airplane, talked to loved ones on the ground, heard what was happening, and actually tried to take the plane back over. There are movies on that. There's documentaries on that. If you want to go watch it, feel free to. All passengers on all four planes are killed. About 3,000 people died total in the attacks. And then you also have 340 firefighters and 60 police officers that died. Here's a picture of the plane flying into the second World Trade Center tower. The people did jump from the buildings that day. That's probably the most horrific for people that lived in New York City. They actually did not plan on telling the people that were at the space station, the astronauts at the space station, but they could actually see the smoke from outer space. It was that thick. They asked ground control. They said, "What's happening in New York?" Or, we can see there's some smoke. Is there a big fire? And they then had to tell them. So this is what it looked like after the towers collapsed. This is the Pentagon Wall. That's the field in Pennsylvania. It was actually, they say field, it was actually a junkyard, or real close to a junkyard where it came down. Luckily, middle of Pennsylvania, not much around. This is the dust from when the towers came down, the people running. There's the before and after on the left. And then after the towers fell, they did have, before they built One World Tower, I think it's called now, they had these two beams that, mark the sky for where the towers used to stand. Because, you look at the skyline and it always have had those two buildings in it. They were always the tallest. They wanted to do something in memoriam for them. So 9/11 does devastate the way that Americans look at life. Now, it feels like we could be attacked at any moment. We have to watch out for terrorism. Terrorism had been something that happened in other countries, happened abroad, happened in the Middle East, but did not happen here. So it was a wake-up call, although we had some domestic terrorism, but nothing on this scale. Some anti-terrorism, the Department of Homeland Security has established. Their goal is to coordinate efforts against terrorism. One thing that Bill Clinton did under his administration is that they refused. There was an area where there were two, like the CIA, FBI, were not talking to one another and sharing information, which turned out to be a problem because they had chatter, but they weren't able to connect the dots in time to foil what had happened. Also, the Patriot Act, where they can, search and look for terrorism. So Osama bin Laden, Bush actually started the war on terrorism where we were going to combat Al Qaeda. Al Qaeda is a terrorist group. It's not the same as the Taliban. A lot of people get that confused. But Al Qaeda is the terrorist cell. They decided that they would wage it against every terrorist group around the globe. So states that had aided or harbored terrorists would also be attacked. So if they allowed terrorists there, that's how Afghanistan gets into this. Afghanistan allowed Osama bin Laden to stay within the country. They had harbored him. So Osama bin Laden is killed by the U.S. in 2011 under Barack Obama. They had actually found his location, or thought they found his location, when George W. Bush was still in office. They started planning an attack when Obama took office. They told him, very similar to like John F. Kennedy in the Bay of Pigs invasion, like, hey, we've been planning this. Do you want to go ahead and do this? And Obama agreed. I think it was in much, much earlier stages as opposed to the final stages for the Bay of Pigs invasion. So the Iraq War, the axis of evil, there were three countries that George W. Bush labeled the axis of evil: North Korea, Iran, and Iraq. We went to war with Iraq on the basis that they had weapons of mass destruction. We know that they never had, is a strange word, they had them, we gave them to them. However, they believe Saddam Hussein used them prior to, us going in and looking for them. We were able to capture Saddam Hussein. This is a war I would have to argue we never really should have fought. But there's criticism, dissent, and his leadership. This increases as the war in Iraq continues, and this is basically his downfall. Notice George W. Bush's approval ratings, pretty high when we invade Afghanistan, but when the war in Iraq begins, it just plummets. Hurricane Katrina and Rita hurt him as well. And then in the midterm of his second term in office, the Democrats will win control. So let's talk for a little bit about Barack Obama and his presidency. We're not going to get into Donald Trump just because, we're still kind of going here. You've got Beyonce and Jay-Z in the White House, of course, meeting him. You've got Obama and his mother on the bottom left. And he is elected. So 2008, he won the presidency against John McCain. He had 52.9% of the popular vote. Of course, he's the first African American, and he will be reelected in 2012. That's McCain and Sarah Palin campaigning against him. Some broken campaign promises, some things that he did not do that he had promised he would do. He does promise to close Guantanamo Bay in Cuba, which is where they were housing or holding terrorists. Prisoners were still there. He never really closed Guantanamo Bay. Also, immigration reform. He was able to do a little bit of, or add a little bit of help for undocumented immigrants, but he was not really able to do much when it came to immigration reform. He does give a path to citizenship for millions of illegals, but um, really it never came to fruition. He was not able to do that. The DREAM Act is one of the areas that he was able to be more successful. I believe since then it has been repealed or taken away. If immigrants grew up and graduated from high schools, this would allow them, if they applied, to go to college, and allow, like, basically take away a penalty that if you had illegal immigrants going to college, you weren't going to get any tuition, reimbursement or any, help from that. I wrote several letters for a few undocumented immigrant students so that they could go to college, and a couple of them actually did under this, so it was pretty important. So his domestic policies, women, trying to, encourage equality. He does, make some changes towards that. The LGBTQ community, of course, he overturns Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the military. There's some changes when it comes to marriage that took place under his presidency that are significant. The first president to openly support gay rights. So this was significant, as well as healthcare. He does reauthorize the state children's health insurance program, as well as offering the Affordable Care Act to try to get Americans insured. Again, this is debatable as terms of like success and not success, because a lot of it has changed after he came out of office, and changed in the sense that it was supposed to change. The goal was to fix the insurance, medical insurance, but it really doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And there have been some significant problems. There's been some talks of repealing it, but nothing's really taken place, there. So election of 2012, he does win again. His foreign policy, Iraqi troop withdrawal, as of 2010, technically the war in Iraq is over, but ISIS is now in Iraq, and we've had to do some fighting there. The war in Afghanistan is supposed to end in 2016, or was supposed to end in 2016. It has. And then, of course, Osama bin Laden. They were able to kill Osama bin Laden, who masterminded 9/11. ISIS stands for the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. If you did not know that, there it is. They are jihadists, militant. They want to have their own country. Strict Sharia law, so no rights for women of any kind. Very, very strict, devout Muslims who are very much extremists. They're the most successful jihadist group over in the world. The Al-Qaeda actually criticizes ISIS and say that they're too extreme, and that tells you Al-Qaeda is the one that masterminded 9/11. So they were able to execute 1,600 soldiers. They're one of the few groups that will actually execute other Muslims, which is crazy. They're the ones that, they've cut heads off, they've burned people alive. They're pretty brutal. It's nasty, nasty stuff. So their scare tactics, you've got some here: force people to dig their own graves and mass execute. During World Cup, they posted a picture of ISIS playing soccer with a human head. They've actually beheaded hundreds of people, including Americans, Christians, and they'll stack bodies and heads in a row and like take pictures and pump that out to the masses. So scare tactics, really high on their levels. So here you see the debt limit increases that have taken place under these presidents. Bush, of course, the majority of his debt comes from the wars. Obama, a lot of his came from social programs, as well as continuing wars that we're fighting. You have to adjust for inflation as well, but that tells you right there kind of how much they've spent. So debt's been one of our concerns recently. The debt clock, if you go look right now, it's definitely not 6.4 trillion anymore. It's way up there. I believe last time I looked, it was 17 trillion, and I think now it's actually even higher than that. So go look it out. All right, we are finished, guys, for today. I hope that helped. And actually, this is the last one. So thanks for following along with us. Hope you have a good day. Talk to you later.